And ladies and gentlemen, we have the best chance to learn in Europe. And well, how do we create a true European ecosystem? That's the question now. An ecosystem where national borders do not limit developments and collaboration, even foster it maybe. And what is needed for that actually? That's a question that Professor Kristel Michielsen will discuss now with her speakers. Kristel is a renowned international expert and leader of the research group Quantum Information Processing and head of the Jülich Unified Infrastructure for Quantum Computing and the Jülich Supercomputing Center, which is located in the west of Germany. She will host the session. Kristel, I wish you a happy discussion, a very good discussion, and well, I'll see you back here in a little while. Thank you.
Very much for the introduction. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us in this panel. I'm Kristel Michielsen from the Jülich Supercomputing Center, and as mentioned, I will serve as your host for this panel discussion. I look forward, and I assume and hope you too, to a lively discussion on how to create a true European ecosystem for technologies. We will talk about how to connect all the national initiatives, programs, and existing and emerging ecosystems, and how to manage the different interests in order to create a strong and competitive European industry, and this in the field of quantum technologies. Now, we will have a discussion among the panelists who are here with us, but also you can participate in the discussion, and you can participate by posting questions in the chat. And if you want, you can also let me know who you would like to answer your question. Then I will come back to your questions towards the end of our discussion and try to find an answer to your questions. But now let me first briefly introduce my panelists to you, and I will then ask them to tell a few things about themselves, and in particular, what their connection is to quantum technologies. So let me start by introducing to you Mrs. Professor Ina Schieferdecker. She's head of the Department for Digital Sovereignty and Innovation of the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Then my second panelist is Dr. Christian Ehler. He is a member of the European People's Party and member of the European Parliament. Then we also have Dr. Gustav Kalbe among us, who's head of the unit High Performance Computing and Quantum Technology of the European Commission. We also have Dr. Sebastian Luber, who's a Senior Director Technology and Innovation of Infineon Technologies. And then last but not least, we have Professor Dr. Tommaso Calarco, who is head of the Peter Grünberg Institute on Quantum Control at the Forschungszentrum Jülich. And he's also chair of the Quantum Community Network and Quantum Industry Consortium, QuiC. So first, Professor Ina Schieferdecker, can you tell us a few things about yourself and your connection to quantum technologies?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristel. Of course, I can. As said before, I'm heading the Directorate on Technological Sovereignty and Innovation, which includes the team on quantum technologies and photonics. So that team developed or contributed and leads the government program on quantum technologies. We created year before the strategic initiative on quantum computing, and we accompanied the development of the quantum roadmap and the development of the concept for the future program on quantum technologies, where we now launched quite some calls. Yeah, for the beginning, I think that's enough.
Yes, thank you very much. That's quite a lot. So, Dr. Christian Ehler, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I don't want to refer to my sunny personality. The reason I'm related to the quantum issue is relatively blunt. I'm the Parliament's rapporteur for the European research program and also for the European digital program. And we did negotiate practically over 2.5 years with the Council as co-legislator on, I think, the main bulk of the European funding for quantum technology, which is in these two programs equivalent to 3 billion euro, but all over all programs it might be or will be 7 billion euro. And since I'm sitting on the money, that's the reason you did invite me.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Gustav Kalbe, can you tell us something about yourself and your
Yes,
quantum technology?
Yes, Professor Michielsen, it was a pleasure. I mean, I was lucky enough that in 1999, I was among the commission officials that launched the worldwide first large dedicated research program in quantum technologies. I mean, it was still close to science fiction. And then I've followed this topic closer or a bit looser over the time. And since 5 years now, I'm heading this unit that has as one of the focus the development of the quantum technologies. And we are now coming at the stage where we were in high performance computing 5 years ago, where we have now many different strategies or plans and programs in quantum, be it in the Commission, be it in the member states. And our big ambition, our big challenge now is to bring all these initiatives together and have a coordinated European approach where we can cover the full picture in quantum.
Thank you. We have one of the pioneers among us here. So then, Dr. Sebastian Luber, maybe you can say something from the industry side.
Sure. So first of all, I'm a physicist, so I'm personally fascinated by quantum. But besides that, I'm heading a group at Infineon where we look into quantum and how Infineon is touched by that. And actually, we see 3 areas where Infineon is looking into quantum. So being a world leader of security solutions, of course, it's very important for us to evaluate how quantum could break cryptography and how to prepare for that. And being a semiconductor supplier, of course, we also want to provide components to quantum computers to also being part of the market. And then also we see these really fascinating new possibilities which quantum computers enable us to do. So we also look into how to apply quantum computers to our problems within the company to get a benefit from that.
Thank you very much. So, and then I come to Professor Tommaso Calarco.
So I think I can tell a quick story by referring to our colleagues who are here. Well, when I was a very young postdoc in my first year, I participated in the first call which Gustav Kalbe was organizing for quantum technologies. Yeah, and then I went on. I moved to Germany. I got a position in quantum information at the University of Ulm, and as a member of the program committee for quantum technologies under the responsibility of Professor Schieferdecker, I have been then involved in shaping the program at the German national level, as well as, of course, at the European level. I've been authoring the Quantum Manifesto in 2016. In that context, I have been meeting Mr. Ehler and invited to the ITRE committee and to discussion with his colleagues in parliament to provide some information and support for their actually wonderful decisions that they made after that, which he just reminded us. And as a last step, a couple of months ago, together with Sebastian Luber, I was invited by Minister Helge Braun to serve in the expert group for shaping the initiative at national level. So, I am engaged now, as you mentioned, as the chair of the Quantum Community Network. In the QuiC, my role is in the Quantum Industry Consortium. I established it, I helped support it. But now, since a couple of weeks, we have a president, we have a board, and so this is really ready to take flight. And I'm very happy to see that to shape future European quantum ecosystem.
Thank you, Tommaso Calarco. So, according to your story, we can also say that the quantum technology world is a small world because we are all closely connected here. So, as we are talking about the European ecosystem, here, Ehler, can you tell us what the building blocks are of such an ecosystem?
I mean, in general terms, our efforts on quantum are part of the Green Deal, which has two pillars. One is the digital one, and the other one is the climate goals. And then underneath, there is a number of funding instruments, regulation, research instruments, which somehow we are trying to bind together now, on the one hand by an industry policy strategy, and then by a research roadmap. And what we're doing right now, after establishing the funding lines, which had been a fairly complicated discussion, but where the German government had been very helpful, because it was actually us and the German presidency negotiating that, we found a way to practically found a fund, a European quantum project by 7 billion euro. That is a certain shift from what we had been starting from as a FET flagship, which was a kind of standalone future emerging technology project, much liked by the parliament and by the community, and then at least publicly announced to be funded by 1 billion euro, that somehow did transverse in the logic of the research program to be part of the program, no longer standalone FET flagship. Might be the reason for that, although we had a lot of discussion on that issue, because what we try to do in recent times, and we might announce in due time, is that we wanted to have from the very beginning not just a standalone research project. We wanted to have a more integrated approach, a governance approach, which is ranging from research, a more open research-driven instrument, but then somehow handed over into the digital program, which is more of a implementation and industry program, and then funded through all the programs in the Union, but also already integrated in other efforts, like in climate change or in the question of the strategic autonomy of the European Union. So it's a fairly unique effort, given the complexity of a lot of DGs involved into that, and to establish a kind of governance which is on the one hand open in terms of research, because we don't want to have a just industry-defined research agenda, but then partly handed over to other programs where we are going to engage much more detailed in technology roadmaps and interact and co-finance together with the European industry. It's a very complex undertaking. It is cross silos. It's to be seen how it's going to work, but I think it's an important message also to the efforts of the member states that we need this kind of coordinated governance.
Yes. So, and in a Schieferdecker, this was on the European level. On the German level, do we also see such a connection maybe in the future between quantum technologies and climate or other types of research activities?
Well, thank you for that question. First of all, I like not to make that a clear cut between national and European level, because as always in a European context, even if we put forward national funding, and definitely key technologies like quantum technologies, I think are a major instrument to reach the SDGs, to achieve the goals we put forward worldwide even, and that should and may include, hopefully, quantum technologies, quantum computing. I mean, we all know that we achieved quite some goals with computing, with supercomputing, but we may even do better if we come up with a general purpose quantum computer in some years, some decades. And of course, that also gives another challenge, knowing that quantum technologies, quantum computing are, as of now, quite resource and energy intense. So at the end, we will also need to talk about their resource efficiency. But in first place, we need to think what are the innovation that we aim at that quantum technologies can contribute to? How do we develop the appropriate business models? So the quest to, so they say, find the right entrepreneurial approaches, and what is the research pipeline that fulfills all the needs which come from the innovation perspective. And in that sense, we try to shape the ecosystem with our approaches with the national funding to find smart approaches to bring together industry, startups, research organizations, universities to fill the research pipeline and a good transfer to, well, impactful innovation.
Yes, of course, German level and European level, they somehow are very closely connected. So we always have to watch each other in this.
Mm-hmm.
So, Gustav, Kalbe, can we say that there is a master plan? How do we get the building blocks which we have been talking about, and where do we finally want to go with these quantum technologies?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, to hand you over the master plan, I cannot give you a big document on that one. So, but indeed, there is a long-term strategy. There's a high ambition to bring into fruition the hundreds of millions of investments that we have been doing collectively across the Union, between the Commission and Member States, in developing the quantum technologies. We have a situation which is unique. We are now at the level where we understand and master sufficiently well the quantum technologies to bring this out of, let's say, the Kuriositätenkabinet and bring it into the real world. And here we are in a situation where there's no lead market, there's no established market, there's no established industry. So we have not a gap to catch up, but we have a lead to take or to defend. And that's why we have seen the last 2 to 3 years an acceleration of the quantum initiatives that have been launched by the Commission. And we're quite happy that also the member states have the same line of thinking. And if you like, our master plan now is, which I would rather call the challenge, is that for the next years, we are in a situation to bring all these different programs, initiatives, what you previously called the ecosystem, that really are capable of building this, that we are in a position to connect all the different animals of the ecosystem and really progressively come to a situation where the scientific excellence we have in Europe in quantum also materializes on an industrial, economic, and even societal aspect. And here I would just like to underline a concept that Dr. Ehler has mentioned, which is the governance, which for us is, let's say, part of the master plan, but it's still early days, so I cannot come up with a governance, and I'm quite happy that our friends in the parliament and in the national ministries, are seeing it the same way, and that we can hopefully next months and soon establish and work on a common governance for the whole quantum strategy across the Union.
So that's quite some endeavor to reach this, I think so. But then, as you already indicated, maybe we also have there some other building blocks. When we have the governments, in the end, it also has to come through the researchers to industry and then finally to society. So Tommaso, Calarco, maybe you can say something about the building blocks and the role that research is playing. And then I later on come to Sebastian Luber, who can then say which role is industry playing in this whole ecosystem and can contribute.
Yes, so actually, in this sense of the interaction between research part and the industry part, I think the big step forward which we had is the one which was mentioned by Dr. Ehler, in the sense that not only we have an important part of our program in the Research and Innovation Framework Program of the European Union at European level, but also in the Digital Europe program. And somehow this duality in a way reflects the connection, because in the flagship, in the Research and Innovation Framework Program, we are having the research part, which can be seen with respect to the industry part as like technology provider, providing technology, the technological basis prototypes, which can then be taken up and developed into infrastructure by the industry. I'm sure that Sebastian is going to mention that. But at the same time, on the research side, we cover the full spectrum. This is very important because, you know, quantum started like basic research and it was completely useless. When I did my PhD, you know, I was told I'm going to ruin my career by doing that, you know. And even I have a story of a very famous physicist who is at the beginning, at the origin of our field. And one day his wife was scratching the eyes of the windshield in the morning of the car. And the neighbor, who was also a famous physicist, said, "What a pity is it that your husband, such a bright young guy, is wasting his career on this." Okay. And the person is at the basis of, I'm not allowed to reveal the name, but you can guess, he's at the basis of, you know, really the development of entanglement and everything which followed. So at the time, it was a purely useless academic research. But then, you know, from this originated the different applications. And so covering the whole spectrum from fundamental side and pushing this towards the application so that we can deliver those prototypes and provide that technology, bringing all of this together is the purpose of the research community, really across the whole breadth of these activities. And we are actually very happy that the European Parliament very clearly since the beginning understood the importance of this whole spectrum, which we cover with our strategic research agenda in the flagship, and which is then the basis for what we can deliver to industry to be taken up and to be realized for infrastructure for the benefit of society.
Yes, so you see that every part of research has its particular role, even this fundamental research. Finally, it comes to an application in many cases. So, Sebastian Luber, maybe you can give your view from the point of industry, what you can contribute to this ecosystem and your building block.
Yes, sure. Thanks a lot. So I've been very happy to hear, because I fully agree that we need science and industry and economy to come together. I think, especially in the field of quantum, we still need basic progress on science side, because there are still some basic developments needed to really bring it to make this happen. This taking it from science towards commercialization. And that's exactly where we often struggle in Europe, right? So I think we see it again now, and we have to become fast and get to speed. If you look at what is happening in the US and what is happening in China, fully agree that the market is not yet established, but there are parties heavily working on that. And what I also noticed is this combination with the digitalization, which I also see. So quantum technologies won't be isolated. They are part of the whole digitalization, for example. And to make this commercialization happen, I think we have to start from a part where the European industry is strong. And there, for example, I see that, talking about quantum computers, the application industry is extremely strong in Europe. And if we start from that, so defining the use cases, so what are the areas where the industry really sees which problems can be better solved by a quantum computer than with anything other, we have a very strong leverage on making this a success story. And there I also see the role of the industry. So to define that, to say, okay, these are the fields where we in Europe, where we in Germany, talking about Germany, see very strong potential. And if we focus on these areas, then it's a high probability that we find customers, that we find market within Europe, which then also establishes a very good ecosystem. So there I see a very, very big leverage for the industry.
Yes, so Christian Ehler, we have seen there are many different building blocks, there are different interests. there are different players. So how do we manage all these different interests of these different players? So we have researchers, we have the industry, we have the companies, we have society. So how can we manage? Is this by your governance structure, which you have in mind, that we will be able to manage to combine all this to a success story?
I'm positive. First of all, I mean, it's very European. I don't want to stress this man landing on the moon kind of attitude in the US, but I think we would never have seen quantum rising if in the very beginning there was also some bravery related to that, politically, scientifically, in terms of spending. And the interesting thing in terms of setting this kind of goals like we do right now in public politics, like the 2030 goals or the 2050 goals. I mean, yes, we on the one hand, we need that kind of bravery, and it's a very complicated process in terms of governance, because you have to avoid this idea of a steering instrument. I think it had to be loose enough to be flexible, but on the other hand, integrated enough that you exactly can handle over research to implementation in industry. But even within that, it might be that they fall apart from a certain TRL level. It's complex, but you can handle it. It's simply what we have to do if we want to handle this kind of transformative, let's say, changes and disruptive technologies everyone in the public politics is now talking about. And the interesting thing is, do we have in public politics the, let's say, intelligent steering idea how to handle that? So, and we can look to the industry, to more complex projects. It's a managerial problem, but it's also a problem of the political impetus. And I think there are two things important. First of all, let's be honest, and it's not a question of a loose way to treat public money, but I think it is important that politics is able to say we're going to spend 7 billion euros on quantum, and it's an abstract ambition. And then if you know a little bit the political process, what we are doing for the first time now is there's interaction between the legislators, the commission, and, for example, the Court of Auditors. Because yes, I mean, if you're honest with formulating bravery, but then in real terms, you have courts in your backyard, you have budget consideration, you have to have a new kind of evaluation scheme. So if you're going to treat that like we had been treating traditional research program, that we're counting working hours and looking to fix costs and something like that, it doesn't work. And we have to have a new idea on outcome-based performance in terms of research, a certain flexibility. And we have to keep in mind that we're in a market economy. So this is not China. And it might be that the market economy have a hard time to set up this complex, on the one hand, flexible, on the other hand, reliable kind of governance structure. But in the end, since it's always integrating, let's say, market components, it might be more successful than this kind of relatively simple, steered new market economies like China is doing. So it is, in political terms, and that might sound funny because you know the complexity of quantum, but to set up a new political kind of governance for that kind of undertaking might as complex as quantum itself. But there is, for the first time, a political willingness to do so. And I mean, that might be the reason why you had been inviting me, because, for example, the parliament doesn't just remain in its role as co-legislators. We are now intensively with the Commission and the Court of Auditors discussing how could a framework look like, which is a governance structure, has a reliable relation to public money, but on the other hand is flexible enough to formulate ambition. It might be that we are saying our governance structure is plausible, but our ambition might be as open as it should be with something like quantum.
Yeah. So, but let us then maybe talk about how far we are already. So where do we stand today regarding this ecosystem? Are we in a Schieferdecker? Are we in Germany at 10%, 80%? And what do you see in Europe? If you compare Germany to Europe, what's the situation in Germany? And what do you think is the situation in Europe? And then I afterwards will also ask Gustav Kalbe what he thinks is the situation already in Europe.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I talk about more Germany than Europe, and Mr. Kalbe then takes over Europe. Of course, as always, we have already achieved quite a bit, but still we are on our road and we have to do a lot to achieve, as you say, maybe 80%. But as numbers are always not easy to take, I would differentiate a little. I mean, we talk in general here about quantum technologies, but there are so many different things and fields in quantum technologies. To our understanding, we are more advanced in quantum sensing and metrology. So we have a good uptake already in quantum communication, and see also enterprises developing. And we could say we have a very strong research on quantum computing, but it's still a long way to go. And for this long way to go, you called it in the beginning a small road. We also think how to scale up with the people which contribute to the fields. And we think how to bring more researchers, more engineers, more young people into the field so that research, strong research, together with education helps to fill the research and innovation pipeline. So, well, that can be done only if we really, as people said before, find new ways to make also research careers not only limiting to research papers, maybe to use other words than what Mr. Ehler said before, to allow also cross or transdisciplinary careers, but where people stored in research go to industry and come back and forth between the two, because it's very good to see what research can do for a developing field and what are the requirements and challenges in industry to make it in broad scale applicable and deployable to the public. And we try to reconsider over and over again what are the right measures to attract people, to support the innovation pause that we all need with the people, because that's the beginning and the end. So it's for the people, and it can and needs to be done by the people. So we try to find smart ways to combine research and education with a perspective on how to achieve a strong innovation with new instruments. And well, if there are good ideas, what we should do in addition then to the agency on disruptive innovation or to our open calls on technologies. For example, in quantum computing, no one can, as of today, say what is or will be the leading approach. So we start with a stronger set of consortia with clear milestones, with clear benchmarks. And over the years, we try to limit the consortia and extend them and change them, adapt them along the results they achieve to really end up in good computing platforms and approaches. So getting back, we are on our way to the 80%.
Okay, good. So, Gustav, Kalbe, what's from your point of view, from the European view? Where are we in creating this European ecosystem? Are we at the beginning of the journey, or did we already do something? We are not close to the end, I think.
No, indeed, we're nowhere close to the end. Luckily, otherwise it would be a boring subject, quantum. Yes. We have already achieved quite a number of things, but I prefer to be modest here. I mean, we are indeed at the beginning. We have now put everything in place that we can build the ecosystem, that we launch the missing components that we didn't have so far to build the ecosystem. I mean, the research, the innovation program, I mean, there we have a tradition of 20 decades, if not more. We have scientific excellence indistinguishably across the union. So this is the one big thing. The other components, we are only about to launch it or just started. I mean, one thing is the whole building of an infrastructure. Be it on quantum computing, be it on sensing, be it on communications. We're also at the beginning of making these infrastructures accessible and available to the users, whatever you call a user. But we have the infrastructure, we are setting up, let's call it accompanying measures to facilitate the access to these new infrastructures or services, be it, let's call it physical access, but also by providing the support services for an engineer or a company like DHL or another logistics company that doesn't have competence in quantum physics, that doesn't care about a qubit, but can exploit the power of the service infrastructure that is made available. Some of the previous speakers mentioned the difficulty about the skills and creating the links between the science and industry or the policymaker or the economy. This is also something where we are just starting by creating not only market opportunities, but by combining the two worlds through two programs and addressing notably the whole question about the skills gaps. I mean, we have for the moment a market need on, let's say, the labor market that is emerging, that for the moment is not covered appropriately by the education system. We see things emerging, but it will still take time before all these different components come together. The one thing we still need to really establish is the whole question about manufacturing, where, I mean, it's something we now need to tackle. It was too early a year ago to do so, and it will still be in its infancy for the next few years. But that's the next big thing. This is all about production, about commercialization. We also still are working on how to connect, let's say, the pure quantum technologies with the other technologies that enable the quantum world. I mean, talk about the vacuum chambers, the connecting electronics, and so on. There's a whole range of competences around the pure quantum that we need to integrate to be able to provide all these measures. So ecosystem is in its making. It will still take some time before we have all components in place. And then I quite like what Frau Schieferdecker said and Dr. Ehler about taking a look what is the best way of implementing it. I mean, today we have to use the processes, the tools, the programs that we have that allow us to launch all the actions in the ecosystem. And in a couple of years, one thing is in cruising speed, we'll identify smarter ways, better adapted ways to implement all our quantum activities. But let's do what we can with what we have for the moment, which is already quite an achievement.
I agree with this. So then, because you were talking about the manufacturing and the commercialization, then we come back to the industry. So therefore, I come back to Sebastian Luber and Tommaso Calarco. So because somehow, definitely, if we talk about industry, we always have to find a balance between cooperation and synergies against the useful and the necessary competition. So we have cooperation and competition. So, and maybe Sebastian Luber, you can say something about this from your perspective of Infineon. But Tommaso Calarco, because you're the head of this quantum industry consortium, maybe you can say something later on how this is felt by different industries in the different fields of quantum technology. So, but first, maybe Sebastian Luber, maybe you can say something about this.
Yeah, sure. I think in general...
how do you balance between cooperation and...
Yes. Competition is a good thing because it's a kind of strengthen the efforts and people try to become better than the competitor. So I think in general to have a system where companies, startups compete with each other is good. Nevertheless, regarding cooperation, we already talked about the necessary cooperation between science and industry, but also within industry, or industry in the sense including startups, SMEs, and big corporates. Very often, and as we see also in quantum, you need a critical mass really to make the necessary progress. And this I also see, so for example, with the QuiC, but also with other national initiatives, that being still a young field, many corporates miss the necessary competencies of every aspect. And there are definitely a cooperation between companies makes sense. And I talking to other companies, I see this happen actually. And regarding the infrastructure, I think this is also an extremely important topic because we are in a field where you need a very large investment if you are on the hardware side. I mean, you need very advanced technologies to make a quantum plane where the magic happens. And if you're a startup entering this, then it's very hard to get the necessary investment. So to have here an infrastructure which is open for startups, SMEs, with manufacturing capabilities, with test characterization capabilities, but also the whole software environment, I think this would also enable a lot of economic stimulus, economic movement, especially on the startup scene. And there I also see the possibility for corporations, because, for example, Infineon corporates, but also other companies might bring their manufacturing competence, their engineering competence into larger entities, into corporations, projects, consortia, where other players then could make use of this huge experience in this field and spare their money for the field where they're really focusing on. So there I see different possibilities for cooperation.
Okay, so Tommaso Calarco, I assume that you can confirm this from what you observe in QuiC.
I can confirm. Let me specify one important thing. I'm not the master of QuiC. I am the slave. Okay, so I am. Now we have a new president. This is Laure Lebars from SAP, and I am the servant. So as according to the mission of an RTO, Research and Technology Organization, which we at Forschungszentrum Jülich try to fulfill, I have sort of provided the organization, I provide personnel, we are going to provide resources for the first 2 years. So we tried to bring it together, but just as a service to industry. It's very important in our view, different from what has been done in the US. In the US, it's sort of a mixed consortium, private, public, but it was important for us and also to the European Commission that in Europe, this is a private undertaking. Of course, very tightly connected to governments, to the Commission, but it is really industry in the driving seat. That is very important. So I'm providing a service there. And indeed, as you say, what I can do is observe. And what I observe is, well, I like to quote here what one of the protagonists in industry, Hartmut Neven, who is a German person, and he is the head of the Google Quantum Artificial Intelligence Lab. Once he told me, you know, this is not a race of different countries, like the space race, everyone sitting on their rocket. or maybe a race among competing companies. It is a race of mankind against nature. So it is really, something which nobody can master alone. And we still see that there is a lot of need for, pooling resources to master those challenges. And also there is a need for pooling resources in a lot of aspects, which are like from education. How do we create education programs for reskilling and upskilling in industry? About standardization, about road mapping. How do we create those devices? We just delivered with QuiC to the European Commission an industrial roadmap for EuroQCI, the European Quantum Communication Infrastructure. So there are a lot of areas in which, we only get there if we do it together. I see a lot of resonance. It has been remarkable that in a few weeks, we are getting 130 paying members of QuiC, which is, I think, more or less twice as many as we saw when the counterpart in the US, QEDC, the Quantum Economy Development Consortium, started. So this is showing to me that there is a lot of areas in which there is still a lot of need for cooperation, and our industry, as Sebastian was saying, and I see him nodding, which is reassuring me, is sort of taking this up and really filling it with life.
Yes, so that's the word, yeah, that's cooperation to get where we want to be in the end. So, but now, after this interesting discussion, I also want you to answer maybe a few questions from which I received via the chat. And you have been talking about US, Google, education, and so on. So one question is that Google announced the quantum computer with 1 million qubits for 2029. So here the question is, what is the comparable target of European companies? And one company was mentioned here, that's Atos, but I think this holds for other companies in Europe too. So is there anyone who wants to give an answer, comment to this question? How will we reach, and when will we reach this 1 million qubit goal?
Yeah, perhaps I can try, as it's coming from industry. So I think we have in Germany, we have this national roadmap being part of the Expo Console together with Tommaso. So the pure qubit number, of course, is not the only parameter which is relevant. And I see us focusing, which I like very much, it's rather on the solution side. So where can really quantum computing make a difference for problems? Which problems can they solve, which I cannot solve by anything else? And there I see very good progress with very reasonable parameters, I think, for the mid-20s, and from there on we will take it. So as already said, it's still in a phase where the market hasn't formed. So it's an ongoing race against nature, actually. Yeah, so I like this very much.
Yes.
And so nothing lost yet, but of course we have to come to speed, and this of course also includes industry.
Yes, so maybe I have here a little bit of a related question. So we have seen it's a joint endeavor. We will need a lot of people working on quantum technology. So here the question is also whether there will be particular programs set up to relocate workers from abroad to help address the shortage we have in experts in quantum technologies. So is there anyone who can and willing to answer such a question, whether we will have special programs in Germany or in Europe maybe?
Well, not necessarily only from abroad, but it's about having programs to develop the people that are competent for the new technologies. And indeed, we are considering the various approaches that we have in our education and research system, where to put the good stimuli to bring more people together. And it starts early. I would hope even to see quantum technologies already more in schools. But definitely we started already in universities and in colleges to have enough working skills which are needed.
Yes, and I would say research is quite international. So if we have these education programs, then yeah, we have a huge diversity in workers available, I think.
Definitely.
If I might say something on the European level, it's a question of ambition. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the idea that with public money or public effort, we're transferring people from A to B in the 21st century, and given the attractiveness of Harvard or MIT, I mean, that's a little bit of a ludicrous discussion. But I mean, we have it in our hands. If we would have 50 quantum ERC grants within the next 2 years, that is a signal you can't oversee. And that's something which is very attractive even for someone still working at MIT or thinking to go abroad. And I believe that although it might sound a little Chevaleresque and very much like a politician, but we have to flag something. And in terms of skills, if we place 30 or 50 ERC grants within the next 3 years on quantum, that is a signal which would evoke, I think, the impression it's Europe where you have to go. I mean, China is to some extent also losing attractiveness after COVID, which had been for a long time. And if you see what you get offered at a Chinese university, if you change from Germany to China, I mean, it's fairly amazing. But I think people are realizing now that there are some kind of challenges. And I think we have it in our hand. For the first time, I think we had been all together, the council, the three institutions, we had been ambitious. And yes, we would have 250 million in the ERC to do so. So from my point of view, that kind of integrated approach to address skills, to flag that there is a perspective for researchers in Europe for the next generation, that is in our hand. I mean, we won't put that on the ERC because, I mean, that's a peer group review issue, and Parliament likes the independence of the ERC much more than sometimes ministries and the Commission. But I mean, we have actually the funding in the ERC that we would put a certain priority on quantum. And I think that's understood. That's understood internationally. If we declare publicly we want to have 30 to 50 ERC grants within the next 2 years on quantum, that is a message globally that will be understood. And we can do. It's a political decision.
Yes. So with this, I think we have to close our very lively and interesting discussion. I would say, unfortunately, because I would have liked to continue a little bit longer. But so therefore, I would like to thank all of you for your contribution, and also for the audience. I would also like to thank them for their questions and active participation. And I think we can take here some messages home. So we are working and building up the European ecosystem. We have to be flexible. We have to cooperate. And as you said, in the end, Christian Ehler, we have everything in our own hands, and the future looks quite good, I must say. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.